Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to All the Screens of Stage, brought to you by Young at Art as part of the Belfast International Arts Festival. I'm Eibhlín de Barra, and I'm the Director of Young at Art, and I will be your host this afternoon as we chat to Zoë Seaton from Big Telly Theatre Company. So just to give you a little bit of context about what All the Screen is, it's actually an international collaborative project between Young at Art here in Belfast, Z Arts in Manchester in the UK, and KOPERGIETERY in Ghent in Flanders, and is being funded through the Arts Council's Four Nations Fund. So during our sessions at All the Screens of Stage, we wish to inspire on three key features in the world of digital theatre: creative opportunities, audience needs and engagement, and technology. And during our creative conversations, we have invited three experts in their field to reflect on these topics within their own field of experience. And then in February, All the Screens of Stage will culminate in a make-a-thon. What's a make-a-thon? Well, think marathon, but with your hands and your mind. So today I am delighted to introduce Zoë Seaton from Big Telly Theatre Company. Big Telly are based here in the north of Ireland with work spanning over 30 years. They create theatre productions, site-specific and immersive games, and participatory community-driven projects throughout Northern Ireland and internationally. They have a reputation for innovation and accessibility. They work across sectors to using arts to deliver objectives for health, education, heritage, tourism, economic development, social development, rural development, and town and city regeneration. Big Telly seek to innovate on where and how culture is made and performed, and how theatre can be used as a tool to regenerate and serve the community to create long-term impact. Their work is multi-platform and cross-sectoral, fueled by a belief in the intrinsic value of arts practice and its potential to deliver on a range of educational, economic, and social outcomes. They describe themselves as being influenced by gaming and escape rooms, computer hacking, burner phones, AI, AR, emotional computing, and binaural sound. Zoë is the founder and artistic director of Big Telly Theatre Company, and Zoë is one of Northern Ireland's most respected theatre directors, having worked extensively in the UK. In 2018, she was awarded an honorary doctorate from the Ulster University for her contribution to the dramatic arts in Northern Ireland. Welcome, Zoë.
Thank you very much, Eibhlín. Delighted to be here. I just remembered I should have put doctor in my title now. You've reminded me of that.
I know you should get on that straight away. I definitely would if I had one. Before we kick off, I just want to let everybody know that this session is being recorded, and we've also made the chat function available so that if you want to ask any questions for Zoë, just pop them in as we go along. We'll happily take those as we go along, but there'll also be an opportunity to ask some more questions at the end. And the recording of this session will be available afterwards so that you can revisit it, or anyone who wasn't able to make it today can catch up. So Zoë, to kick off, I know that the digital domain is not new to Big Telly, and you were certainly using many digital performance platforms prior to when the pandemic pushed us all online. But I do think it is fair to say that Big Telly's digital output since March 2020 has been prolific. Just to give a little bit of context, let's just have a little look at a digital diary video that Big Telly have made, just to give us an overview of this work. So we'll have a little look at that video now. Thank you so much for that. Playing that in for us, Natalie, who's our little backstage gremlin for us today. Zoe, first of all, can I just say what an incredible amount of work has gone into that. It just seems to be the most prolific body of work that actually came as a response to COVID very, very quickly. Like you were in the domain almost straight away with some of these interventions and continue to, right? Tell us a little bit about the approach.
Yeah, I mean, whenever lockdown happened, we had 6 projects running across Northern Ireland. So we had 20 artists employed, and we, were committed to employing them for the end of their contracts. So then I was like, all these, incredibly talented people are all at home with nothing to do. So we started playing with isolation theatre. So I would phone Nikki Harley and she would hang her phone out the window, and I would go, how do I feel more immersed? How do I feel like I am hanging out the window? And how do I feel like you are putting me in the washing machine? And what's the audience journey? And then we started making theatre. I phoned Lucy at Creation Theatre Company. We just done The Tempest in an industrial site. And I said, what about we turn it into a game online? And then we started. So that was 2 weeks into lockdown. And I think what I loved about it, I loved the speed of work. I liked the fact that you could just think, you could sense what the world felt like and think, we're going to do this right now within 2 weeks. I really enjoyed that. So that's why, like Recipe for Disaster happened in January at the end when people were feeling terribly low. And that was about having fun being at home and going to an 80s disco. So it was very exciting to be able to be as responsive as that with theatre. Because quite often theatre takes a much longer planning time.
Because I think that was the thing that struck me most, was just really how quickly you had content out there at the start, as you say, within 2 weeks, when we were all still trying to work out what end was up, and I was still trying to work out how to work Zoom. But the fact that you were out there producing content that quickly was just phenomenal, and certainly was one of the reasons that Big Telly became a real go-to place for me when I was having to do that. Oh my goodness, the Belfast Children's Festival in 2021 is clearly going to have to be online. So how can we make that as engaging as possible? And certainly Big Telly were one of the first ports of call with that, along with Cahoots and I, with the University of Wonder Imagination. Operation Elsewhere was a real go-to for me for having a family piece that was really immersive and engaging, and not just watching what we were seeing a lot of in those early days of lockdown, which was basically people's archive films, which are like fixed cameras at the back of auditoriums, which, let's face it, I don't think does the artistic content much benefit at all. Talk to me a little bit more about Operation Elsewhere and how that came, because I think some of young at arts fans and fans of the Belfast Children's Festival will remember that from the 2021 March Festival. Tell us a little bit more about how Operation Elsewhere came together.
Yeah, it had existed as a real life piece. We'd done it in Donaghadee and Enniskillen and a couple of other places, and it was a game. And I think what became very exciting really early on about digital theatre and about it being live was the ability not just to ask an audience to step into our world, but also the extent to which people were prepared to make their worlds part of the experience. So in Operation Elsewhere, there was obviously a crisis, and you had to turn your, whatever you had in your room into your wedding outfit and go and get undercover and be, so people were like taking cushion covers off and making hats and just having crack, and there was a point when Nikki Harley would say to people, if you've got war paint, put it on now. And people would go to their kitchen to come back covered in mustard. Like, it was insane. People were just so up for it, and so much more up for it. Like, I'm not somebody who is a fan of audience participation, but if you're in your house and if you can choose to turn your camera off, it's entirely on your terms. And it seemed that to be a real liberation. When people realized it was on their terms, they were like, wow, where do you see what we're going to do? And people coming back, again and again, and more invested. So that was exciting. And then in Operation Elsewhere, we had people had to phone characters, use phones to phone characters live within the show and distract them while other things happened. So it seemed very easy to me to involve people and to include people in that journey. So yeah, we had a lot of fun with it, and a lot of, it's extraordinary audiences when you see people, all over the world watching the work and getting involved in it. It's exciting times.
And it's a really accessible way of introducing Irish mythology to a lot of international visitors as well. And certainly I know with our international delegate programme during the festival, it was a real highlight for them, and we got a lot of fantastic feedback. One of the other key pieces just in that video diary we saw, Macbeth, the Scottish play. Tell me a little bit about that, because that, you know, some of the reviews and feedback you got from that performance was really phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of ready. By the time we did Macbeth, we'd done 5 or 6 digital shows, and we were learning it. I mean, my God, with every single one, we learned loads about what to do and what not to do. And by the time we got to Macbeth, I think we were very, you know, we'd started using, when we did the machine stops, we realized that there was this guy watching the show, and he was on his bike cycling and watching the show. He got in touch after, and he was the director of Channel 4 News, Martin Collett. And he said, I absolutely love what you're doing. We were using like cardboard cutouts and had people putting their faces in cardboard cutouts to pretend they were in airplanes and stuff. And he said, I love what you're doing, but have you heard of vMix? And of course we haven't. And he introduced us to this kind of vision mixing software, which is a little like OBS. We started, you know, being able to take the Zoom feed of a live audience member and put them in different situations. So the audience could join the banquet as visitors and as guests. Now, the technology was a bit clunky, you know, it was not straightforward by any means, but that sudden ability to use tech to blur the boundaries of what world you're in was really, really exciting. And we'd been working on it for some time. We planned to do Macbeth before the pandemic. You know, that was always the plan for that autumn, and it was going to be called The Witch's House, and you went to the Witch's House and they kind of involved you in this plot world. So we had done some thinking about it, but I think we were just ready at that stage to tackle a text, and also interested in playing with green screens. You know, in The Tempest, where Prospero said, our magic, this rough magic I hear of Jure, all the cast took down their green screens, and you got a sense of like, we are playing, let's pretend this green screen is a different world. And you saw people, the kind of vulnerability of people just being in their homes and in their bedrooms. And I think with Macbeth, we were ready to play with that and play with what happens if, you know, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth were from very ordinary homes, and we had webcams on them, and then sent them on a journey which was into kind of into royalty, obviously, but also into unreality. So their worlds went from being very real and very based on webcams to green screens and fake backgrounds and everything false. And the witches played with that technology, so they could pour, you know, coloured water and project films on. And we were interested in the witches as I suppose being able to play with technology, and also they were hiding out in the theatre. For me, that was a stage where, you know, theatres were still closed because they were dangerous, but everywhere else seemed open. So we had this thing at the start where, you know, witchcraft was dangerous, and we thought, where would all the witches hide if there was crack to be had? And we thought they'd hide in theatres. So a lot of it was set in theatres. And some of the kind of video pieces we made, you know, they were kind of 2 to 3 minute recorded pieces, were very much about a love song to theatre, how much we missed it, how beautiful it was. And how capable of kind of experiment and danger and excitement it is as an art form.
You mentioned just there, just in the journey between Operation Elsa and the other earlier work and Macbeth, there being learnings that you were learning as you go along. Can you maybe think of some examples that you could share with us of what some of those learnings were?
Well, things like muting everybody. So when we first did The Tempest, everybody just talked their way through it. Then we learned how to mute en masse. And Zoom developed as well. I mean, Zoom introduced new tools all of the time. But yeah, like when we did Alice with, you know, Alice as a theme park and choose your own adventure, and in terms of working with the collision of different platforms together, we had to learn, and I think everything about how to engage people and how to make sure it was live and make sure it was immediate and make sure it felt accessible. All of that I think was learning. And we had it was when we did The Tempest, and we didn't know how to end a show really, and we would just end up chatting to everybody. And there was Sue, who was on her sofa fast asleep, and we were all going, Sue, Sue. And Sue was just like sitting there slumped. And then we thought, my God, Sue is actually no longer breathing. So we were trying to get email addresses and trying to find out where she lived. Like this whole drama where the whole cast are actually trying to find out where Sue lives to see, can we, you know, get a taxi around to her house. And then she wakes up, completely doesn't realize she's still on Zoom, and starts carrying on with her cross stitch. And we're all going, Sue. So yeah. So many, you know, exciting and interesting journeys along the way. And then we got asked to do some kind of invisible theatre at a massive conference in LA, the Max Planck conference. And that was just ridiculous what was going on. We were doing like pop-up invisible theatre and pretending things, and got ourselves into some very tricky situations, I have to say.
Sounds like lost it or to follow by the sound there. I think the thing that really strikes me is just I was actually also going to ask you, and I think we'll come on this a little later as well when we talk about creative opportunities, but talk to me about the artists that we brought on the journey with you. Was it a mind shift that they had to go in on, and how willing were they to do that? The big thing that I really find with our own artists at Young at Art is what I just find really humbling was just how willing the artists were to try anything, everything, just to keep that engagement going with the audiences. Was it a bit of a learning curve for the artists that you were working with? Tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, yes, clearly, but I mean, I'm very, you know, very, very good at surrounding myself with really talented people. It's my my secret weapon, and also people who are makers. I think, you know, quite often with Big Telly we have people who, you know, will have a multitude of skills. They'll, you know, they won't just act. They will make and write and direct and design and be very, very involved. And I think that was a massive thing, because what people were doing in the early days where they were just at home, you know, and the design process was a designer said, you know, saying, right, join on your phone and take me into your wardrobe, and going, oh Jesus, is that all you've got? And can we take the collar off that? And why don't you tuck that in? So it was very, and I love that. I love the kind of you know, sticky back, you know, kind of crafty version of that, where people would make their own masks, and, you know, Dave Morgan would arrive around at people's houses saying, I've made you a thing, and all of that. So I think we were very lucky, in the community of artists that we work with are all very, very resourceful. There were some artists that didn't, you know, that we lost very early on, who said, I can't do this, this is not for me. And everybody was at a different place in the world. You know, sometimes people would phone me in absolute tears and go, you know, there's a pandemic on and we've just spent an hour doing a kind of pretend fight on Zoom, and that was a savior for some people, and it entirely didn't work for others. Mm-hmm. So I felt we spent a lot of time talking to people, you know, counselling people through what they were going on. I think for many artists, the kind of community and the ensemble and the family of the theatre company became a real savior for a lot of people.
And I think that also goes from the audience point of view as well. I think it was just that idea of having a live communal interactive experience together when we were all stuck at home and all desperately missing live theatre. Again, I think I had a lot of feedback from parents that I knew, of just saying how joyous it was, and children who were actually becoming quite introverted and sometimes even non-verbal were really letting their hair down and really getting involved in a way that they weren't sure if they would with the pieces, you know, and certainly was getting a lot of that feedback as well. Yeah. Have you received similar?
Yeah, and also we were getting emails from people saying, you know, I've been housebound for 5 years and I haven't had access to theatre, and thank you. And, you know, we had so many of those people saying, you know, I have a child who's autistic that can't go to kind of formal institutions, that, you know, so we had thought that we were really good at being accessible. And then through the pandemic, we realised actually there's so many people we haven't reached, we haven't connected with. Mm-hmm. That was really humbling.
And what was really clear to me as well from that video diary that we were looking through there is that you were also talking about work that isn't what I would call strictly interactive, immersive theatre work as well. It was also touching on other sectors' work. Like for instance, Recipe for Disaster. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was early in January, and we had already done a project with Paula McIntyre where she had made food as part of the experience we made. And we just felt people were so low. We just thought, you know what, people are absolutely exhausted. So what we need to do is we need to do a thing. We didn't know what that thing was. We gave ourselves 5 days and we said, we're going to get Paula on board. It's going to be a wedding. The audience are invited as wedding guests. And we're going to make a really, really complicated wedding feast and then have a disco. And I think it was just that time of year, it was something like the 13th of January. People were, you know, were afraid and you know, felt isolated and were depressed about the next kind of phase of lockdown. And what was amazing about it is people were filming themselves going shopping. and saying, this is me in my supermarket, I can't get Gruyere, but I can get this. And, you know, and then people were sending us pictures of all the things they might choose to wear for the 80s disco, and what did we think they should wear. And people were really invested in the whole kind of event of it. And then I was saying, look, we need to be aware that people may not keep their cameras on because, you know, we're in their kitchens. So like it's quite intrusive. Everybody kept their cameras on. I'd say 98% of people kept their cameras on. And you would see people coming up to screen to look at instruction. I mean, Paula is dreadful at instruction. She's brilliant at demos, but like she does everything. She forgets to tell people like important things, like put the butter in and whatever. So we had to have a character there going, Paula, I think what you mean to say is melt the butter here and do that. But in a way that added to the fun. You know, we asked Paula to make impossible things. So she made like baked Alaska and cheese souffle, and there were disasters, and people, you know, we give prizes for the worst souffle and prizes for the best this and stuff like that. But I think, and then we created a kind of different layers of interaction, so that we realized that, you know, in a house there might be one person who's cooking, but there might be two people that aren't. So they could phone the best man and go into a breakout room, and, you know, he was, you know, had cold feet and had to be chopped down, and somebody else had to be found, and the bride needed help with this. So it became a kind of lots of simultaneous, you know, things happening.
Layers, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which people could dip in and out of. And then the 80s disco, we said that'll last 15 minutes. Well, 2 hours later, I'm still saying to Sinead, go and put some Aperol. So it just became a really community event and a lot of fun.
And then obviously the work that we saw in Digital Diary, I know that there has been a lot of work that has been evolving and happening past that, but let's just talk about that point we got to, where things did start to open up again and theatres did start to reopen, and really how Big Telly's digital work has continued to evolve post-lockdown lifting. So, you know, what lessons did you learn during the lockdown process that you've been able to bring into that point? And have you found the appetite for people to stay in this domain is still as live as it was when we were all shut in homes? Like, I think there was a sort of very much a forgiving attitude to a lot of online work at the start because people were just so desperate and hungry and delighted that people were trying stuff. Did you feel that audiences maybe became more discerning as time went on and actually expect more from their digital experience? Or just talk to me about how the work evolved as we were coming out of the lockdowns.
I mean, I think there was more choice in entertainment as soon as the world opened up again, and, you know, there was a kind of backlash against online theatre, I think, for some people. I mean, we were very interested. So we did Right Up the Street, which was where we arrived at people's door. You know, we turned the whole street into like a gaming experience. People were flashing lights and doing things and throwing things out the windows. And that involved some kind of an AR experience and a kind of show going on WhatsApp as well. And then we did Department Story, and that was very much about us saying that this is a live site-specific piece of theatre, and it's set in a department store, and you come in and you're shoppers, and there's, you know, the overcoat was in the menswear section, and Maupassant's, the necklace was in accessories, and different stories blended from different departments. And we said that's fine for the live audience, that's their experience, but let's have a digital audience as well, and let's give them completely different agency. So we started working with a genius called Jack Hardiker, who's a digital artist, I guess, and he helped us to develop an app called Remote Control, and the remote audience who joined for Department Story had a choice of different camera feeds. They could chat in the chat function. They could go to different rooms. So like when the main action was happening, if a character left the room, we'd put a message up going, they've gone to camera 4, go if you want to hear what they're really thinking, kind of things like that. And also they could turn on snow machines and sound effects and things like that using smart technology. So we were trying to give the digital audience different agency. And when obviously it all went wrong and the woman took somebody hostage and ended up on the roof, we relied on the digital audience to look through the camera feeds and tell us who was where was safe. So we were trying to create a kind of complicity between a digital audience and a live audience, but to give them completely different experiences. Now, I would say it worked at the end, but it didn't work at the start because we made a massive kind of faux pas in that we lost our venue we were supposed to be doing it in. So in 3 weeks, we took over a new space. We had to rewire it. We had to install 5G. We launched an app and we launched a live show all on the same night. And, you know, the live show worked, but it took us, you know, I'd say 5 or 6 goes to make the digital experience work. So yes, we won't be doing that again because I think the digital deserves as much attention as the live show. And when you're doing a live show, I think you need to do that first and then see how it becomes a digital piece. If indeed
one needs to become before the others. And is that something that you really would say you would take away as learning from the development of Department Story? Yeah, actually, I think we have a video extract of the piece. I think it would be really lovely just to let everybody have a little look at it. Natalie, if I could just get you to play that. It's not the full video. We'll just show a little section of it, but we will pop the link into the chat so people can view the whole thing if they want. But Natalie, if you could just play that for us now, that'd be amazing.
My name is Zoe, I'm the Artistic Director of Big Telly, and I came up with the idea of doing a show called Department Story. And what I think I was interested in is the idea of different stories belonging to different departments. So the idea that the overcoat might be in the menswear section, and the red shoes might be in the shoe department. All of that kind of intrigued me as a way to categorise stories and as a way to create a kind of theatrical anthology of stories.
I'm Jack Hardiker, I'm an artist and designer, and I've led the creation of Remote Control. Remote Control is an entirely new digital theatre platform. It gives online audiences a new agency that they've never had before. The online audience can interact with actors, they can interact with the physical audience, they can make things happen in the space. So for example, they can make lights change. They can also trigger physical things to happen, so they can trigger smoke or they can trigger a moving mannequin. The online audience are greeted with an antiquated CCTV system. They're able to look through different cameras in the space, and they're also able to chat to their fellow audience members or to the cast themselves. And then there's this additional functionality, which is these buttons that allow them to affect things in the space. So whether you've got an audience of 50 or you've got an audience of 500, they can all interact with the platform and they can all make things happen in the space.
I'm also interested in site-specific work, but in taking places that are familiar and using the way that people use them as a kind of format for how to tell stories. So we've done The Worst Cafe in the World, where all the stories were on a menu and people were seated and they ordered them. And this time we were looking at what is behaviour like in a department store. How do we use that concept of browsing? How do we invite an audience to re-encounter that space?
Thanks, Natalie. I think that just wanted everybody to get a little snippet of what that was like, because it just looks like the most really engaging and fantastic show. Just was interested in what you were saying there, Zoe, about the get the live right and then get the digital right, or just choose one to develop first and then move on to the other. Because do you think that was really just a question of capacity as well as anything else of being able to get all of this right, or was it just about seeing what was the most important, what was the most important aspect and elements first?
I mean, I think the thing is that as a director, I'm focused on the audience experience. I'm constantly saying, oh, I'm an audience member and I'm lost, or I'm confused, or I'm bored. And I couldn't navigate two audience experiences simultaneously. I was just thinking about the live experience and how you move people out of space, and it was really hard to also be that person at home who's chosen a personal shopper. And so I think you just can't walk in both sets of shoes simultaneously. I couldn't. I needed to focus on one and get one right, and then focus on the second.
That's lovely. Just a question's come in there from Alison that actually deals with that. It's asking, Zoe, what are you most excited about in terms of audience experienced? So Alison was really asking, because the digital world evolves so quickly, how far in advance does Big Telly program? And then from your point of view as a director, what are you most excited about in terms of audience experience?
Yeah, I mean, I want people to have the time of their lives. You know, I just want people to have a great time. You know, I'm happy for people to think deeply and to feel sad and to go through emotion. But I just want people to be really, really engaged. You know, I think as our attention spans get worse, we've got to fight for the audience's attention. We've got to make sure we keep it. Maybe shows, I think, should be shorter. So I'm interested in keeping people's attention and keeping people engaged. I want people to have the time of their lives. I want people to connect. I mean, we do plan. So we've got like we've got some projects which, you know, pop up very, very quickly, and then we've got longer term plans which are more complex. We're just about to launch a digital venue called the Brick Moon, which Alison will know about, which has taken a long time to develop. And actually we're joined by Rianne Jeffrey and Jordan Whitefield here at the moment, who are both working on Brick Moon, who are absolute stars. And the idea behind that is that it's a digital venue, but it also has kind of physical landings, Brick Moon landings in the real world. But it's a digital venue in that when you go, and it's about process, not product. So when you go into the art gallery in Brick Moon, you will see lots of different artists who have webcams on just in their studios. So it's like if you go into an art centre, you can watch artists work. That's the kind of theory behind it, is that it's a collection of different webcams, and that these are curatable. So somebody might decide today's theme is going to be about rear window or sea pollution, and that would mean that each different space is 5 different spaces with different kind of platforms within them, can all be along a theme. Or like I was talking to like some young guys in Portrush the other day who are not interested in the arts at all, but they're going to curate a day for me in Brick Moon, and they want to have like webcams on their skateboards and on a fishing boat and on the place they hang out around the back of the amusements, and as a way of looking into other people's lives and sharing connections and walking down streets together with somebody who's in New York and you're in Coleraine. I think it's got real potential.
Great. And there was just a little question there, just to remind us again of the name of the artist who developed the platform for Department Story.
Jack Hardiker.
Jack Hardiker, yeah. But what we'll do is we will pop a link to that video, that full video, in the chat, so you can have a little look at that, because I think it goes into a little bit more detail there as well. From Rhiannon, Zoe, what do you think are some of the benefits of digital theatre are now in the world after lockdown?
So I think we've only just opened the door of what's possible. Like, I think it's incredible what's possible. I think particularly, well, obviously in terms of accessibility, but also in terms of, you know, art and connections and where you are when you experience art. You know, the fact that some people came to our shows while cycling, you know, was amazing. You know, and I love the kind of fact that people may consume art differently. Like, why can't you watch a 5-minute play? Why can't you watch a 1-minute play? Why can't you suddenly be in a piece of immersive theatre in a station near you? So I think it's a really, really exciting world. And I think there are millions and millions of possibilities. For me, what's exciting is the live. I'm not excited by recorded content, although I don't mind kind of, you know, sometimes mixing the two up. But I think it's what's live and what's fragile. And, you know, so many people said, you know, during the pandemic, were you not worried that the internet might go down? And that's like, it's like doing something on the street when a car goes past, you just deal with it. And I love that. I love the fact that it's live and we don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, I remember when we were doing The Tempest and we realized we got quite a lot of press attention very early on. And the New York Times were in reviewing, and Annabelle, who played Miranda, her internet crashed. And she phoned me in the middle of her first speech, and she phoned me like in absolute floods of tears. So I do know the panic. Like, I know so many stories of actors, you know, being in a cupboard and then, you know, the internet going down and running out and shrieking at their partner to get off PlayStation or whatever. And, you know, but for me, it's the liveness. It's the fact that it's connecting to people at their most kind of raw and vulnerable, at home, domestic. I think it's got a million amounts of potential. I think it's exciting, and I think we can blur the boundaries. You know, we're making a piece next year which is a digital piece, but at each show one audience member will have an actor turn up at their house, you know, and you don't know if it's you. So we might also send some fake, you know, Ubers round to knock on people's doors, and you don't know what's live and what's not, what's close and what isn't. And I think that's all exciting.
That sounds very exciting. I just want to go back a little bit more about Brick Moon. Just tell us a little bit more about that concept and the website development, and also how that's leading into the Brick Moon landings, and give us some examples of those.
Yeah, so Brick Moon is basically an interactive website, and you go into different spaces. We wanted to feel like an audience journey, so it's quite immersive. And you go into different spaces. And at the moment, the platform that we're interacting with is Zoom, but there is potential to use other platforms. So in an ideal world, remote control, which is the app we developed with Jack, is permanently in the theatre. So in the same way as you might go into a theatre and you might go, oh my goodness, you've got moving lights, we will have that in our theatre, and that will be a tool for people to play with and create with and explore. So it's very much about sharing process. You know, when we've tested it, like we did a test in India a few months ago, and they had, you know, we were able just to look into a Philippine musical theatre company who were in the middle of rehearsing. It was just so interesting to be able to be open. I mean, we've always liked open rehearsals. You know, we've very, very often rehearsed in shops, in shop windows, and invited people to be part of the process. And I think it appeals to me in that sense, that you can just, you know, encounter people. So art isn't this kind of mysterious thing which happens in a room. Sometimes it has to be, and sometimes that's fine. But I'm always, you know, kind of more interested in what the caretaker thinks of what you're doing than, you know, the funder or the, you know, so it really appeals to me, the democratic kind of sharing of process. And I think that's, and we were talking about, we were hoping to do it for Frankenstein's monster rehearsals, but we didn't end up really having time to do it. But you can also choose what bits of your process you share. You can have, you know, a camera on in your green room, or you can have, you know, when we had our creative shops, we would have had, you know, somebody in, you know, a shop who was building, you know, a table of death, with the sign outside going, I'm building a table of death. What do you think? How should I do this? And then you get people who are interested in building, and then they come to the show. So for me, it's really interesting to share the processes as a way of engaging a wider range of people.
Definitely. And I think, you know, just looking back at, you know, the three main principles of all the screens to stage, the three main areas of inquiry that we really want to look at, and the first being creative opportunities. I think you're touching a little bit about that. And again, it goes with a question that we have here, thinking more about the creative process. Do you consider the pandemic time as a period of transition, as a moment of new beginning for new styles, methods, and approaches applicable to the artistic expression? So I just wanted to sort of address that, Zoe, but also really look at the creative opportunities. Like, I know in terms of the number of artists that have been engaged, it's been phenomenal for lots of people. That was the real key thing of why we really wanted to start and get the digital work out there during lockdown. But let's talk to me a little bit more about that creative learning and development and the creative process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so democratic. I think that's what I love about it. And we did a lot of kind of masterclasses with students during the pandemic, and still do. And it's the fact that somebody can, you know, go into the bathroom and find it, or you know, find a paperweight, which is a crystal, and hold it up to the camera and start playing with effects. You know, I love the fact that, you know, so what changed for us, I guess, is that we no longer were speaking directly to theatres and festivals about when they were going to program us. We just said, you know what, 2 weeks from today, we're going to do a show. I love that. I love the fact that we were our own distributors, and we could just do stuff at will. So I think for me, you know, you don't have to hire a venue. You can be creative. You can be expert. You know, I think ultimately it's the democracy of it. I like that you can just do it, and the accessibility. You know, we were able to work with actors who, because of caring responsibilities and things like that, wouldn't have been able to come to Northern Ireland to be in a show. So I think there are massive opportunities in terms of who you work with, and how you work. You know, the fact that some of our rehearsals, you know, you can't really be on Zoom effectively for more than an hour and a half at a time. So that means that over, you know, 3 weeks, you're only working for an hour a day. That really suited some people, as elderly parents or young children. So I think in terms of audience and in terms of artists, it has a massive potential to be able to be woven into the fabric of people's lives.
Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, again, going back on this idea about the pandemic being a period of transition and maybe a moment of new beginning. I know that when we spoke, you were a panelist on one of our industry events during the online 2021 Belfast Children's Festival. It was an event we had called Going Digital. And at that point, Zoe, you were very much, you know, sharing some of the things that we have also recapped on today, but we're also very much talking about how this is a domain you see Big Telly in moving forward. Like this is the new direction. You don't want to just go back to producing straight theatre shows to be programmed on like a 2-year programming cycle, that it's that the immediacy and the accessibility. But also, I mean, during that talk, there was actually an artist with a disability who actually then fed back something you touched on earlier, is that they had seen more theatre in the past 6 months than they had seen in the past 5 years, simply because it was a more accessible platform. And I think that's something we mustn't forget, we mustn't leave behind, you know, that it did actually go, it is reaching a whole audience that we weren't able to before. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Zoe?
Well, I guess because when we've just made a piece of theatre with absolutely no digital content that didn't go digital. So, I mean, I think there's also that, you know, we've made a piece in swimming pools, we've made a piece with no words. It's another glorious art form to me. It's not, you know, I think...
Not a replacement, yes, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you everything has to be digital, and it doesn't mean that it's some things can be absolutely not digital at all. It's about, we now have another storytelling tool. And how exciting is that, you know? And now that we've made Frankenstein's Monster, you know, I'm thinking, okay, if we did a digital version, it's, you know, it's like you translate that what we've got translated from a short story into a piece of theatre. You know, now I'm sure we'll at some stage we'll translate it into a piece of digital theatre. We need to take that time to make those translations. That's why Department Story, you know, was too difficult early on, because we couldn't translate something we hadn't made yet. But yeah, I think it's another amazing art form that's available. And I think we're only at the start, you know, like in the pandemic, people were making, you know, shows on WhatsApp, shows on Google Docs. Like you know, there's so much that we can do that I think it would be, you know, I don't really understand the backlash. I know there are some people who say, well, you know, some people are against it, but then don't go, you know, it's all right, like, you know, but I think it's got massive potential. And also I think because our work is quite often, we work a lot in small rural communities, and I see it as a massively brilliant way to connect those communities to the rest of the world in terms of Brick Moon landings particularly. So there'll be a live event which is also on Brick Moon, which we're connecting an audience in Garva or wherever to a global audience. I see that's the next job of platforms like Brick Moon.
And just picking up on that idea of audience engagement as well. Again, one of the other Brick Moon landings that you were telling me about, Zoe, when we were chatting about today, was Bus Stop, and just about that potential to attract a whole new audience to live theatre work that may not have experienced it before. Tell us a little bit more about that concept.
Yeah, so the concept is that it looks a bit like a bus stop, so it's like an ad shell. It's a screen and there's a bench, but actually that ad shell is just like a Zoom screen, and it's a frictionless digital interface. It's a Zoom screen with a remote control coffee machine, so you can be at the bus stop or be at the bench, and you can talk to somebody on screen, and they can talk to you and they can see you, and that person on screen can also say to you, look, I've got a storyteller in Nigeria that wants to tell you the story. Are you up for it? And you can say yes, or you can say no, or they can say, you know, I don't know if you remember Doris, she went into the hole 3 weeks ago, she'd love to connect with you. So it's a frictionless digital interface that you can just talk to, and they can talk back to you. And I see that, and that's one of the pieces we're called Brick Moon Landing. So that's where the dock in Brick Moon may become this piece of physical infrastructure, which if you go on, so if wherever you are in the world, if you go onto the Brick Moon website, that might be where the dock is that day. And the person at the dock, who's a bit, I suppose, like a DJ, can say, there's somebody just come in from Norway, do you want to have a chat with them? And you can. So informal meetings and conversations are, I mean, I see it as a vehicle for theatre as well, but I think for brokering connections and breaking down some barriers, I think it has real potential.
I think it's fantastic, and has such a role to can also be played in rural isolation as well. It's a very exciting prospect. So just your latest work, which premiered at the Belfast International Arts Festival this year. It's a catchy little title, Frankenstein's Monster is Drunken, All the Sheep Have Jumped the Fences. So that's also just finished a run in London, and I believe is heading to New York in January. So I think you just have mentioned this as well, that, you know, digital theatre was never a stopgap, you know, it was, but again, your heart is still very much as a theatre director. Talk to us a little bit more about that, about your love that you still have of live theatre, but also the potential of developing that hybrid version of the digital and the live product, and just a little bit about how you know, that thing you were talking about, having to get one right before the next one is developed.
Yeah, I mean, Frankenstein's Monster is a story I came across in lockdown that Owen Booth had just won the Moth short story competition that was in the Irish Times. And I just fell in love with it. I mean, it's an absolutely glorious story. The premise is that Frankenstein's monster has been trapped in a glacier for 100 years. And then the local villagers spot him and say, there's something in the glacier, let's get it out. And they're like, I don't know, we think he might have killed people. Do we want him in our community? Can he join in the bingo? And I was just very, very taken with that story of, you know, who is the monster? You know, if a monster comes to live in your town, what does it bring out in you? And how forgiving are we? How good are we at rehabilitation? You know, in the story, you know, the villagers actually become more monsters than the monster. And all of that, I'm endlessly fascinated by the mob mentality and how we can all kind of turn into that. So I fell in love with it. I talked to Owen about it. He said, absolutely, fire on ahead. And we started adapting it. And I just, for me, it was just about theatrical storytelling. You know, we talked in the story about there's a big looming armoire. And very early on, it was really clear to everybody involved that that should be their house and they should live in that. And then as soon as you're in that world, you know, a tea chest is a haystack and the trunk is a air hostess trolley and everything's everything. And then you're into my favorite sort of theatre, I think, where you have a theatrical language where you're literally playing and you're juxtaposing naturalism and quite detailed naturalism with, you know, real storytelling. So one moment you're you know, telling people that this is, you know, it's that thing if you're adapting a short story, you don't have to act out everything, you know, don't use the theatre to illustrate the short story. That's if you want to keep those words, what else can be happening during it that's rich and adds to that or doesn't or counterpoints it. And it felt like a brilliant kind of springboard for that kind of storytelling, which is my favorite kind of storytelling. And you know, we had a fabulous kind of team of actors and creatives who were all up for playing with that. You know, Aaron Ross, who's a technician who works with us, I said, could you go make me a ski lift, you know, something that you wind up and lights come out. And he just made this amazing thing, which is just, you know, exactly what Frankenstein would have made if he was making a ski lift and not a monster. So it's very much about making and playing with that. And yeah, it's been a gorgeous journey to be on.
And the question in from Ian is just asking, do you see this as a new theatre technique, or do you see it as a new art form, a new way of connecting with art and with people?
Digital. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see digital theatre as a new art form. Yeah. I see us very much at the start of that. Of making that new art form, and I see it as very immersive. You know, I'm interested in, you know, when we did the machine stops at the end of it, you know, the characters are kind of released from their underground worlds, and when you looked in gallery view, the audiences, loads of them were taking their cameras outside and showing us where they lived. Just think, my God, like the moments, you know, of sharing that are possible there, as well as, you know, images you can construct. You know, I think I'm constantly interested in that, in pieces which, you know, you perform something which is terribly well rehearsed and practiced, but also then you involve the audience in, you know, a bingo session or all being in an airplane by implication. They're all somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. So everybody just listening on the call today, last opportunity to ask Zoe a question, but in the meantime, while you're typing those little questions in there, Zoe, can I just ask, what's next for Big Telly?
So there's lots of exciting things happening in Brick Moon, which is brick-moon.com. And like you say, we're, you know, been really lucky to have, you know, Rhiannon Jeffrey as our lead artist on that, and Jordan Whitefield working on the kind of PR and marketing side of that. So lots of exciting things coming up in Brick Moon, where we've got festivals, we've got a project called Christmas Markets, where characters will go through Christmas markets in Belfast, Glasgow and Munich. And a story will be told that way. And we just started today working on a new project called Play It By Ear, which is audio experiments where two people listen to two tracks and get weaponized against each other, which we're working with Sark on. And we've got about 4 projects happening at Christmas, which Nikki Harley is directing for us. And yeah, so much going on. Lots and lots of exciting things.
I just don't know how you have the time or energy, or your team have the capacity at all, because I must say the workload is just prolific. So Zoe, listen, all I can do is thank you so much today for your real insightful and thought-provoking session. And just to let everybody else know what is next is coming up for all the Screen to Stage. Our next 2 sessions, we'll invite Tim de Pape. I'm going to absolutely murder the Dutch language in the next wee section coming up, so please brace yourself. Tim is a theatre maker with a background as an IT developer. So that session is going to be on Friday the 16th of December. And then on Monday the 16th of January, we have Debbie Bandara, who is the director of Forest Tribe Theatre, which is a carbon neutral dance digital theatre company that produces immersive and interactive work. And then in February, from Friday the 17th to Sunday the 19th of February, we'll have our Make-a-thon. And in that, we're going to explore how we can make relevant online interactive arts and performance arts. And all the Screens to Stage lead artists, Tom Sheehan and Illa van Utrecht, there I go again, murdering the Dutch, God love this. They'll be coordinating a group of participants in a 48-hour hybrid event, which will be both online and then offline as well in Ghent, where on day 1, we will be inspired, day 2, we will brainstorm, and eventually be prototyping new ideas and formats on day 3. Our online participants then act as the reflective team and the sparring partners for our offline participants. So for all the updates and info on those events and how you can get involved, please go to our project website, which is allthescreen.com. So no S on screens, just allthescreen.com, and we'll pop that link into the chat. But we very much hope to see you all join us again and getting involved in some of those sessions. So Zoe, thanks once again for today. Really thought-provoking. And also just a few other thanks, just like every theatre production has a backstage team, we have our own backstage team, because as some of you will know, I'm completely technically inept. So thanks to Natalie Murphy for keeping everything running so smoothly in the background for us. And a big thank you to everybody at the Belfast International Arts Festival, and congratulations to Richard and the team on what has been a wonderful 60th festival. And I'd have to take this opportunity as well to plug my own festival. So a quick save the date for you all with that as well. Join us from the 3rd to the 12th of March for the Belfast Children's Festival as we celebrate our own birthday, our 25th festival. So we very much hope to see you all then. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Zoe, again, just a master as always. Thank you so much. It was just a pleasure to chat to you today. Everybody stay safe, stay sane and stay online, and we'll hope to see you all in some of those other forthcoming events. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Eibhlín.